Good afternoon and welcome to another AMA Fireside Chat. Of course, you know me, Emil Story, your host, and my co-host, Austin Walters, co-founder of the Success Mentor. Today, we're joined by the Ronn James, real estate agent, broker, coach extraordinaire. As per the name, how, Ronn, do you attract, grow, and retain real estate sales?
Great question. Depends how much you want to. It starts with a mindset. Truly, I meet a lot of people who stumble and fumble into real estate, and it is not helped by the fact that our education process does not support them. Nobody has been taught how to sell real estate, how to run a real estate practice, how to run a real estate business, how to be profitable, how to pay taxes, so they wing it. So I would definitely start with the fact that they really need to sit down and have a mindset, conversation, shift, plan before they get into the growth strategy. However, that said, occasionally you can kind of bump into people who will attract somebody who wants to buy, sell, or trade in real estate, and now you have a client. Or do you? How well can you service them just based on the fact that we know each other? So you could be my brother, my brother-in-law, somebody that I know, grew into school with, etc. And you have the best of intention to make money helping them buy, sell, or trade real estate, but you may not know what you're doing. So my truth is that a mentorship, an apprenticeship situation, or even on a deal by deal basis would greatly help you establish growth patterns that have you be not only successful, but profitable.
Ron, I agree with you. Like, I think mentorship and having that support is critically important. Like, let me ask you this: what do you see the best realtors do in terms of bringing in those clients? Like the top tier, top shelf real estate agents. What makes them different, and what are they doing different to separate themselves in terms of their branding, the attractiveness, bringing clients in? Like, what are the best people doing?
Some of the best teams that I work with and coach for a number of teams that are at the pinnacle of their game. However, they don't literally just send out random people to gather, names, addresses, and telephone numbers, right? There is a full onboarding, a full process that a new agent or somebody in the business that's joining the team has to align with and acclimatize to the team environment. All too often, people think it's that easy that I have a client. And it's like, now what do you do with them? How are you going to serve them? We're in a very litigious world now where your error of I didn't know is extremely costly. As a matter of fact, if you bump into, a challenge and it wasn't malicious, right? In most of the expert witnesses that will literally be providing counsel that's going to take you to task, you start with 65 infractions of what you did wrong before they even open the file. And the reality of this is the fact that they didn't know better. There is nobody on the leadership side that's kind of going, whoa, 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 slow down. Let's have a look at your deal. Let's have a look at the paperwork. Let's have a look at the interaction. Do you have some kind of note taking that's been done since you've said hello to this particular client? They don't know.
So, with your particular coaching style, to get granular, or let me ask, do you get granular? Like, would you actually want to go into each and every deal that they're doing and look at the paperwork and do it? So there's almost this kind of like check and balance.
Absolutely. And that's a great question. In any other industry, we don't. I'm laughing because we have a young guy that I coach who's 2 months on the job. He's done 2 leases, which is fantastic. And I love his zeal and I love his enthusiasm. And man, is he a go-get-him kind of kid. Kind of reminds me of me. I was very, arrogant and ignorant all at the same time, but charming and sweet. The challenge with that, though, is now that he has buyer and seller clients, he's like, don't worry, I got it. And it's like, have you ever done a buyer consultation? Have you shown people what the rules of the roads are and how to actually become a successful buyer, especially in a marketplace where there's 22 houses for every one buyer. That period of choice, literally by itself, is something that's overwhelming. And then on the selling side, you have houses now that are sitting on the market on average plus 90 days, in some cases as much as 6 months. How are you going to handle the conversation with that particular seller who's sitting there going, well, the market sucks and it's your fault? So the reality of that situation is that's where leadership comes in. That's where sales teams have stepped into the void left by many brokerages and operations that basically say, oh, you got your license from the college? Great, you can sit there. And you're now paying me $2,000 a month for that chair. They're not training them, they're not coaching them, and they're certainly not helping the buyers and sellers of today get good deals.
When you so obviously when you get involved with with a new client or coachee, if you will, you're working with this person to make sure that they're compliant. I mean, it sounds like a lot of this is compliance kind of basis.
Absolutely.
But I want to make a hard left turn back on the highway, so to speak, and really dive into the attracting, the growing, and the retaining of real estate sales. So let's go with that first one. When you're talking to your new coachees and you're talking about attracting real estate sales, what's your trick? What are your tips and tricks? What would you do?
100%. It's obviously a matter of, go with what you know, right? When I ask people to sit down and say, all right, do you have a database of people, whether you're new or struggling as a realtor at this point? A lot of people say, sorta. And it's like, okay, what does sorta look like? And what I tell you that it isn't is, 500 followers on Facebook. Great. If I put them all in a room at this point in time, would they know you? Would you know them? Would you have a telephone number? Would you know who their spouse is? Do you know the dog's name? Do you have a contact telephone number for them? Or better yet, an email address? At this point, in many cases, we have followers, not clients, and certainly not people that are added to our database. And the reality is that for every 100 people in your database, it's the possibility, not the guarantee, but the possibility of $25,000 in earned gross commissions as a realtor. So you do the math, right? If I have 100 people and I want to make 100 grand, I'm short by 400 people, 300 people. So when I'm sitting down and talking about attraction, I'm like, okay, where are we going to get 300 more people that you know? And they have no idea. So we start talking about, okay, what about borrowed databases? How about I really do a good job with Emil at this point? And he kind of goes, you know what? I like you. I like the cut of your jib, so to speak. At this point in time, I will introduce you to other folks. Well, there we go. Now we're starting to daisy chain how we can build a database from nobody to 500 people.
So just to double click on that too, because I do think that the database piece is connected directly to how do you network effectively, right? I
Yep.
think they're completely interchanged there too, and there's that interconnectivity. So, Ron, I'd love to hear from you in terms of as a high performing real estate agent, how do I network effectively to convert people from I know Ron to I know Ron and I'll do business with Ron because Ron is my go-to guy. So like how do you transition people from being within your circle, within your network, to you becoming the go-to person when they have that question? And how does that happen before doing business? Because obviously, as you've done multiple deals with someone, you will automatically be their go-to person because you're the top of mind. But how do you get to that point? And I think that's a big question. Like, how do you convert from I know you to I'm doing business and this is the person that I will do business with? So how do you make that transition?
So what top performers do, okay, let me start, it's easier. So for people that are in the business or just breaking into the business or trying to survive in it, right, they're literally grabbing at life rafts. If I ask these realtors, who's your ideal client? It's like anybody with cash. And that alone tells me, Lucy, we got some splaining to do because that's not going to work. right? I could be, whiz bang real estate agent. If Emil doesn't like me, right? If he's not my ideal client, it will become obvious and painfully so very, very quick. So top performers lean into literally becoming incredibly clear, indelibly clear on who their ideal client is. So much so that they actually have an avatar. They can pick these people out of a crowd at this point inside a mall. They can walk around kind of go, that's my ideal client, that's my ideal client, that's my ideal client. They absolutely know by characteristics, by the avatar that they've created as to their ideal client, who those people are. And what they did because of it, if they did find the connection to their ideal client, they've also had a complete list of services that ideal clients want. So if I've described Emil to a T, I can pick him out just by looking at him at a party. And I also know what his menu of services is going to look like. I also make sure that if I've identified my ideal client and a list of services that they'll respond to, also who I have to be to service him. That's why at a networking event, I can walk in, and when I make a connection, it's solid instantly. It's not if we'll do business, it's when we'll do business. And then I come across Austin. Austin's a great guy. Austin is a wonderful client. He's not my ideal client, and I know better. Oh, but Austin's going to be a great buyer or a great seller. That's great for somebody else. Let them have Austin because Austin's their ideal client, not mine. And that's the difference between a top performer and somebody that's trying to hang on in the real estate business.
So you would literally recommend turning down clients?
Yeah, 100%. If they're not your ideal client, it's going to be a challenge. I run into a lot of overwhelmed, a lot of overworked, a lot of displaced real estate agents that are trying to be all things to all people. I can tell you, I've been married 4 times. You can't be all things to all people. To the right people, the work is easy. It's very much a flow, and it becomes a succession plan. And if I have that kind of relationship, those are the kind of clients, those ideal clients are the ones that bring me into their circle, make networking that much easier, that database so much more rich because it's filled with people just like them.
Mm-hmm. Now, so I guess obviously the first part in hunting for said ICP or ideal client profile, like we like to call it ICP. The first step is identifying what that ICP is. So you must obviously have a specific way to do this, or that you like to guide people to do this. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, it's interesting because as I lay this down, and if we were sitting over a sandwich and I'm trying to kind of explain that process to you, it literally has people a little bit stymied. Even some of the better people, the people that have been relying on old systems, old databases, and old tried and true to get to the numbers that they're going with at that point. However, once I start introducing them to another different level of identifying their ideal client, we actually have systems that test. How do you know it's the ideal client? How do you know their characteristics are going to match with yours or what you're trying to offer? And, as we lay that down, that you've heard me talk about my 100 days to peak performance. It's really building you a field guide to have some kind of, tests, like a level, for example, that I can come in and kind of put it on the top and the little bubbles all line up, and I put it on the side and the bubbles all line up, and I put it on the bottom and bubbles all line up. It's like, there we go. Now we have a metrics that basically identifies who the ideal client is. My ideal client isn't the same as yours, isn't the same as Austin's at that point. And that's got to be okay. You're trying to literally be all things to all people, and you're spending your time trying to be all things to all people, not serving the client and not actually enjoying the process.
One of the things I like about this a lot is when it's funny because there's a bit of we had an AMA here with Salman Hussein a few months ago anyway, and he's a marketing and brand specialist. In fact, he recommended this book. I picked it up. I should say he bought it for me, but it's called Shoe Dog, and it's literally about the Nike brand. But one of the things that he really honed in on with this particular subject, the subject of ICP, is we need to get we need to get really specific on that in order to make sure that we're fishing in the right pond. And so I had this idea now when you were just saying this, and I want your take on it. So we've got the idea to we're kind of going from attracting to growing, but we're still starting with that ICP, or defining that ICP, figuring out this ideal client profile. Now, would it be safe to say that you might want to get a few people around you that have a different ideal client profile, that you can say, hey, you know what, I don't really deal with dentists, but Bob does, so I'm going to pass Bob this dentist.
Great idea.
That he's going to refer you business back that matches your ICP.
Well, and that's what a lot of the top performing teams do. So if I have multiple personalities, we're not all going to have the same client profile. Mine that I deal with, that are specifically wired into me at this point, will be mine. But then yours will be different, and Austin's will be different. And if we are a collective, we're like an association. Somebody comes in and I start doing my client intake or onboarding. At this point, I'm like, this is Emil's client. Yeah, hang on a second, let me go get him. Boom, bring Emil in. And the reason why is because it will be seamless. Emil will just be able to kind of hand glove this particular relationship, and it will actually migrate into business either now or in the future. And certainly as a networking situation, Emil becomes their person, or I become the person because the client's ideal to me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. So we've identified the ICP. We've built a little coterie of people around us that are going to help support our business, and their business, obviously, we're going to support just the same. Now we got to grow. What do we do to grow?
So again, this is where, with the ideal client, they come from ideal nests. Their circle of influence and who they respond well with and who they, either do business with or like to associate with, will likely be my ideal client as well. So when I tell a realtor that they need to have 1,000-person database, they just about fall off their chair. Like, they don't know 1,000 people, or don't think they do at this point. And I said, I didn't tell you that you had to go out there and glad hand kiss babies to 1,000 people to make them your database. If I have identified my client, there's a good chance they have a database. Emil has 200 people in a database. Most people do, right? And I'm talking about name, address, telephone number. They know you, etc. It's not followers. It's people that are genuine relationships that you have. I can tap into 5 key clients that introduce me to databases of 200 plus people, and there's my 1,000 people. I don't have the time, especially if I'm an active, high performer, or even a new agent, to go try to glad hand and build a database of 1,000 people.
Yeah.
And there are people that kind of go, well, I can do it digitally online. I can do an online lead gen situation. I'll guarantee your program is going to be very watery. You're going to need 100 people to find one that is your ideal client, because it's just the nature of how you're trying to corral the lead is not going to support you. However, for the people that do that, I know realtors that have databases that are the size of a municipality. We're talking like 300,000 people in a database. They never show a house. They're keyboard warriors about saying, I'm going to give you Johnny, I'm going to give you Bob, etc. They don't go serve it. They don't care about the ideal client situation, because their model is a very different one, a very big one, and it's a very expensive model because of the software, etc., that needs to be done to run something like that. It's not fathomable for the average person out there who's trying to make a living in real estate.
It's interesting. And so I guess, Ron, an additional question that I have for you is, how do you bring in the traditional sense of real estate in terms of meeting people one-to-one and building that relationship with the new style of social media and all these new ways in which, and the technology advancements, like, how do you kind of bring those two worlds together? Because I am of the belief that um the relationship's always like king, right? If building the relationship and having the relationship and having that one-to-one relationship is king, but how do you kind of mix the two? And I'd love to hear your thoughts on how do you bring both together to bring these worlds together so that you're taking advantage of the technology and advancements there, but you're not losing the personal touch?
Well, and that is it's a great question, Austin. Thank you for that. I can tell you that I worked with a realtor who belonged to an organization that the real estate company was a tool used by the real estate industry. And what they did was they leveraged that tool to generate and scrape leads. And this particular realtor was quite successful. They had like 3 real estate leads the first day. And literally in a matter of about 3 months, they had 160 people in a database. They submitted 17 offers on behalf of this database of 160 people. And here was the result. This is a seasoned realtor, 7 years in the business, certainly knows their way around a deal, how to have language with buyers, how to speak to seller agents, etc. And the reality is that they were 0 for 17. They couldn't put one deal together. So you kind of go, okay, so that's an inferior skill set. At this point, they just couldn't pull the trigger. Okay, maybe. But the biggest problem, and to your point, Austin, is they had no rapport. They didn't find these people. They didn't develop relationships. They weren't referred to them. They were an online lead. They were just a name and a telephone number, and it was like, do you want to go see 123 Annie Street? Yes, I do. They were door openers for free. And when they did get the offer at them, most of the conversations were, you're not my real estate agent. Who's your real estate agent? Not you. And 17, 0 for 17 sales. That tells me that system, that model is broken. I mean, sure, could I improve the sales, the language of that particular realtor? Yeah, sort of. But if I have no connection to you, Austin, right? You don't see me as your agent. You don't see me as your advisor. I'm the self-serve bot at Walmart. That's it. That's all I am. I'm a do-do-do-do.
It's funny. One of the things that I have seen people do very, very successfully, and for what it's worth, this is my belief as to how you should use social media in this business. And when I say this business, I really mean this time, this world. If you are in the relationship-based business, which is literally any sales gig, you use social media as a way to get your foot in the door, and then you actually have to walk in and sit down and have the coffee with the person, right? You actually have to water the, what do they say there? The grass is always greenest where you water it. Well, you have to water the grass, right? Like you have to do the legwork. If you've sent a couple DMs and communicated on, via DM on Instagram, that's likely not enough to build a relationship or a sustainable relationship on. But then, of course, you use that to get your foot in the door. There's a thing here, and I think we're tying right into this real nicely. But the third piece of this puzzle is retain real estate sales. Before we go, let's talk about that for a second.
Well, and that's a great segue into, if I had built 0 rapport, and I'm 17 for 0 on offers at this point, the chances of getting referrals from any of those 17 people are nil, 0, right off the hop. So me actually trying to kind of build my database by being ingratiated to somebody who sees me as their person, as their advisor, as their specialist, dare I say, their realtor, right? It's not there. I don't have that license with these people. I'm not seen as that partner. I'm seen as a cog in the wheel that just gets them to the next level. You cannot have retention, right, if you don't build a retention strategy. And what I mean by that, we talked about right off the beginning of the call, if I have identified you as my ideal client, and I've provided you with ideal service. I literally have a conversation or a lunch meeting on a fairly regular basis with one of my mentors. We go to the same restaurant, and I'm like, we go to this restaurant all the time. It's a wonderful restaurant, and the food is amazing, etc. So I'm not complaining. But the reality is, he said, I go to lots of restaurants, but I come here because this is my home. I'm like, do you own the restaurant? He said, no, but they treat me as if I do. When I come in, I don't even get a menu. I just tell them, hey, Bob's here, and the kitchen knows exactly what to do. They know 2 or 3 different things that I could enjoy for lunch. They know how often let's see, it's Wednesday. Okay, so we're going to give him the fish. They know how he likes the fish prepared. They know how, whether it's vegetables, there's no potato, there's no rice. Like, he doesn't have to order conventionally. He just comes down, sits down, and enjoys his lunch, pays his bill, and goes. And his guests, that would be me, also get treated like we're part of the family as well. We are a visitor as a guest of his. And that's when he has an unbelievable tie to loyalty. The restaurant makes sure that he feels at home. They have a retention strategy. They know how their ideal client with ideal services, and what's happened in this case, how they've made this client feel. That feel is the stickiness of where the retention lives. If I feel like I am coming in as, numero uno customer, I am a preferred, a valued, a VIP, right? You have my business. You have all of my business and that of my friends. I will highly continuously recommend your services from a retention strategy. I'm not going anywhere unless you really blow it. So retention can come from building all of those blocks that we just talked about during this call. You will not have retention if you've just had some kind of online interaction, as you've described, where it's been transactional, not relationship.
It's one of those things that I think gets overlooked. You get the business, you sign the deal, you got the money in the bank, and then we just leave it.
Yeah.
It's super, super overlooked, that retention piece. So I love the fact that we landed the plane on that. In a couple weeks, we have a very special guest, just like Ron, coming on, Maggie Murad, who's going to be talking about how to stay positive. Now, that is one you don't want to miss because, quite frankly, I think we all need a little positivity added back to our day-to-day lives. Ron, thank you so much for joining Austin and I on this AMA. We look forward to catching you again. Have a good day, guys.
Thank you. Wow, thank you guys. That was awesome. Really appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Fantastic, Ron. We'll talk soon. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye now.